Welcome to Shop Talk Live, episode number 359. Today we have Mike Pekovich, Vic Teslin, Amanda Russell. What else you want to know? That's enough to get me to listen. But before we listen, I want to let everyone know three exciting things going on at the Fine Woodworking universe. We've got 2 tours coming up. There is September 7th through 14th, England's Woodworking Heritage Tour with Mike Pekovich and John Binzen. Dream team, if I've ever heard one. And not to minimize the dream team that is Phil Huber and Logan Whitmer, but in September 20th through 27th, we've got a Denmark and Sweden woodworking tour. I think they called it the Nordic woodworking tradition or something like that. I don't know which one I would pick. That's either one of them would be fantastic. But also, I want to let everyone know the last super exciting thing here in Fine Woodworking, May 1st and 2nd. Fine Woodworking New England is back in Manchester, Connecticut at Bob Van Dyke's Connecticut Valley School of Woodworking. It's such a fun time. Antique tools all over the place and demonstrations and talks by some of my favorite woodworkers. So head on over to finewoodworking.com/new-england and find out more. So we'll have the tours linked down in the doobly-doo. We'll have Fine Woodworking New England linked down in the doobly-doo. And this year, I am going to go out on a limb and say I am not going to throw my back out the day before Fine Woodworking New England. That is my God's honest goal. All right, on with the show.
What have you been up to, Dave?
I sort of hit the ground running this new year. It's been a lot of little projects, none of them actually involving making anything out of wood. But a lot of like new students and some other teaching opportunities that have come up. And
great.
So I'm just trying to there's a lot of stuff that comes out, and then I want to say yes to everything because everything sounds so cool. But then I have to put it against the sort of litmus test of is this part of is this what I actually want to do? Or is this just this would be cool, so I want to do it.
Yeah.
So because I don't have a whole lot of time for cool at the moment. So it's just a matter of prioritizing and thinking about it and learning to say no better.
That's tough. I crossed that line in terms of commission work quite a ways back. There's a time when commission work really was nothing more than, can I get someone to buy the wood so I can actually make something like that?
Right.
And then it got to be where I would feel obligated just to take on anything that came my way. And then after a while, like you said, you kind of realize that, especially if you're kind of doing, fine woodworking on a part-time basis around all the other stuff that life has to throw at you, I realized that, like you said, am I getting paid to make something I want to make, or I'm getting paid to not be making something I want to be making? It's kind of like a zero-sum game. So fortunately, a good friend of mine, he's like a full-time woodworker, cabinet maker, and architect. And so if I have someone saying, can you make 30 picture frames for a showing? It's like, no, but my buddy can. Or,
Yeah.
That's the thing is, for me, a commission is an opportunity to make something I'm really excited about. If it's a little bit less than that, then you start to think about how much money you're bringing in and whether you need it.
Right.
The worst is when it always happens, you take a commission when nothing else is going on. And it's just sure, I got nothing else going on. Let's just go ahead. Let's jump in. And then immediately you start getting pounded with other things coming in. It's darn it. Oh, well. So
I'm convinced that Murphy's a woodworker.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway. So, yeah. That struck a chord. Is this something I really want to be doing, or is it something maybe it's different motives other than that? I think that is really important to keep track of. What are you up to, Amanda?
Me, need to be getting in the shop more. I'm setting up a new shop. I moved into much smaller, at least personal. Like my bench space is very small, like 140 square feet
Okay.
with a larger machine shared area. So
Good.
been moving into that, getting organized. It's really more of a storage unit right now than anything else. But yeah, I gotta do a lot of work to get kind of going. But it's good. And then I wish I had. I'd really like to take on some commission work this year. I haven't for a couple of years, just being too busy and not really having the time. But
Yeah.
Having a little less pressure to pay for a larger space, giving me a little more freedom to work on the stuff I'd like to work on. So
Good.
I'm hoping that's coming soon. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. But yeah, it's a big change for the new year, but
Cool.
happy I'm doing it.
That's good.
We have a few questions I think that are going to take up quite a bit of time to answer, some really good ones. So why don't we just dive right into those?
Love it.
The first one, I like this one, is from Matt. It's kind of in the theme of what we're talking about, but he's asking, I'm curious how you juggle shop time and family. I want to build a desk, which will be a pretty large project for me. It'll likely take a few hundred hours to design and build. I haven't built anything in the last 3 years. I can't imagine building a complicated, for me, project in 45-minute to 2-hour increments. Do you have any recommendations or tips that might help avoid mistakes caused by constant starting and stopping? I'd also be interested in any online courses or articles that have come in the last few years that would give me a refresher course on shop safety. The table saw can be a fickle mistress, and I don't want to put myself in a bad situation that could lead to injury. So good question.
That's a good point. It's tough for folks who have a regular day job and then are woodworking in the evenings or on the weekends. And I mean, when I'm teaching individual students, they're all basically of that ilk. They have full-time jobs. They work in the evening. They work on weekends. Sometimes if they're fortunate to be able to reduce their work week to a 4-day and then be able to have a day in the shop. I have been preaching about what I call a triple O, which is basically an order of operations. And I've done that ever since I was in the military, because everything in the military is a checklist. And so I have checklists for everything. Before I logged on here, I had a podcast checklist, and it's is my microphone serviceable? Is the audio thing serviceable? Am I actually recording? I point to things, because then it forces you to actually look at them. And then when it comes to furniture making or any project, really, I map out every step, sort of in big sort of chunks, mill the material, then do this, then do that. And then each one of those steps gets broken down into much smaller steps. And I do that for almost everything that I do, mostly because I'm sort of in the same boat where I could be here in the office doing stuff for the, part of the day. And then I get a few hours to go down into the shop and I do stuff there. But then I might have a couple of students the next couple of days, and then I sort of forget where I left off. So the longest time suck for a lot of woodworkers is scratching their head at the bench trying to figure out where they left off.
Right.
And I think most of us suffer from that, whether we're pro or not. And so if you can create some sort of a document, and it can be in your phone, it can be on a piece of paper, it can be whatever you want, then you can sort of walk into your shop and go, okay, now I'm going to lay out the mortises. And you don't have to think about it. If you've got 45 minutes because your kid's asleep, you know what I mean, having a nap, you can do that, right? And then you're not spending all that time thinking about it.
Yeah, that's I agree with that 100%. And just the idea of kind of what you were saying, and you were getting at, is you kind of break down every process, and then you break down every process into individual processes, so that I think a really good rule of thumb is don't leave something half done. that's a killer. But like you said, if you break everything down into enough steps that you can go out and get a step done, I'm going to go out and scribe the end lines of the mortises that I need to cut. Cool. Do that. It doesn't, as opposed to getting a quarter of the way through setting up to cut mortises. And then it's like, okay, wait, where was I? But, the biggest time suck is actually thinking about what you are going to be doing while you're in the shop. And I say, think about woodworking whenever you're not in the shop. When you're driving, when you're supposed to be paying attention in a meeting, laying awake in bed at night, I get most of my woodworking thinking done then, so that by the time you come in the shop, you know what you're going to do. You know how much you want to accomplish, get in there, get it done. And I've lived by the 45 minutes to 2 hours window of work for my entire career. I remember being at a woodworking show. I think it was Kelly Mailer was there demonstrating, and I asked Kelly, I said, how do you, if you're only going to spend 2 hours in a shop, how do you really make sure you're taking advantage of the time you have? And he kind of looked at me and paused, and it's like, it takes me 2 hours to figure out what I want to do that day in the shop. What do you mean? So, yeah, that is sort of a foreign kind of reality to pro woodworkers, but I've definitely always found myself more in the part-time camp. So I definitely empathize with people. Yeah, especially something like this. You're taking on a huge multi-100-hour task. And it is tough. A lot of us coming into the craft, it feels like woodworking is a natural pursuit. Once you have kids, once you have a house, once you really can't go spend 5 hours on a golf course on a Saturday.
Ew.
But I can be in my shop, which is pretty close to home. So that kind of counts. So do what you can. You're juggling a lot of plates. And it may feel really frustrating, like, man, I don't get any time in at all. But in the big picture, in the kind of longer scope of your woodworking career, any investment you can make in the craft at that point in your life will pay huge dividends later on. I think it's super tough if you're maybe a couple years short of retirement or a couple years into retirement to say, hey, I think I want to take up woodworking. I know a lot of people who do that and who've had good success, but that's a really steep curve at that point. So anything you can get under your belt prior to that is just that much further ahead of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think too, Mike, the other thing that, if I could wax philosophical for a moment, the Stoics tell us that the biggest thing that upsets us is when an expectation is not met. And so a lot of times when we're juggling family and work and a hobby, it's like we want to do the hobby all the time, right? We want to do that. But the reality is that we can't, but we don't accept that reality. And if you don't, then you end up being upset because, there's this sort of niggling thing, and it's like inside you that's like, I want to be out in the shop. I want to be doing this. I should be able to do this, but you can't. Right. And so it's a sort of radical acceptance that it's like, I'm a parent, I'm a spouse, I'm an employee, and I'm a woodworker. And so you have to and that will allow you to be content with that 40 minutes.
Right.
As opposed to the 40 minutes running out and going, ugh, I wish I could stay out here all day.
Right. Yeah.
I want to second the checklist thing. I talked about this at Woodworking in America. I presented on small shop production, and having checklists and the order of operations, like you said, Vic, is super important. But I also color code my checklist to where if I have, say in green, it's like this all the steps I need to do for this subassembly, then there's a green title to the next step. That subassembly goes into an assembly. So even if I am checking off one small task, whether it's 45 minutes of, like you said, labeling where mortises go or something, I have this physical thing that shows me I am making progress, even if it doesn't feel that way. But also it's just the practice of woodworking. 45 minutes might be not a lot of time to contribute to a project, but 45 minutes of practicing dovetails is pretty valuable, And so I've been thinking about that as well, as because for me, sometimes it's hard to justify going to my shop. It's a 25-minute walk each way, since I don't have a car. So I have to really like make time for that. But I've been trying to think of like a side checklist that's just like the practice of woodworking. Is like, even if I get in there, I'm not maybe working on a project right now, but I can justify, spending an hour of travel time to, for 2 hours of practicing something I wouldn't, what I'd have, don't have anything better to do with those 2 hours. So,
Right.
So having just a checklist for order of operations, but also a checklist of like skill building things that you can do in a small amount of time, or to where it does feel like progress, I think is really important.
Well, and I think I agree with you 100%. And I would love offline to discuss your color coding because, like I said, I've lived in checklists my entire life. I had no guidance when I was 18 and joined the military, but it was quickly foisted upon me in the form of checklists. And so I'd love to sort of, because I regrettably was not able to take in your talk at Woodworking America because they had me busy flapping my gums. And so I would have loved to have, because I was hoping that there was going to be some like nuggets of information about checklists that I haven't sort of discovered yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. There's like, the one thing woodworkers, I think, chronically do, especially new ones, is they overestimate how much time something is going to take to do. So it seems like, let's take something, for example, let's say you were going to cut some mortises with a router, right? Just like nothing, no fancy equipment, just a router and a fence, and you're just going to cut mortises into legs. And so the setup takes a bit of time, but once you actually are cutting the joint, like, I don't find that takes very long at all. And I think, like, I know, Mike, you do a lot of work with the hollow chisel mortar, sir. And it's like, once you set the machine to do what it's going to do, now you're just plowing through it and getting it done. Right. So I think we chronically overestimate. A lot of times it's like, oh God, I can't start that yet. That's going to take me 2 hours. And then like 40 minutes later, it's done. And so the checklist also allows you to sort of make notes about how long processes take. And then you're a little bit more equipped. And that doesn't take very many projects to do. Like if you journal about your progress and it's like, this took this much time and this took this much time, the next project, it's like, oh, okay, I only need 45 minutes to mark out and cut these mortises. So you start to be able to plan better as opposed to this sort of nebulous project thing.
Right. And it allows you to pivot as well, which when you're in a shared shop is really important, because if you need a table saw setup and somebody's doing a bunch of milling that day, then you're not.
Right.
So instead I'm like, oh, well, I look at my checklist and I'm like, well, I can sand and pre-finish these parts that I did before. And it allows a little more bit of not only pivoting, but just keeping a project going. Because I had points of frustration where I'm like, oh, well, I came in mentally thinking I was going to do this, but I have to pivot. And that kind of gives you this physical thing to like, well, there's a million other things, little steps I need to do that can get done today, so.
Well, and I heard Eric's a little bit of a power tool hog, so
yeah,
I've heard that about him.
I'm out of the shop now. I can say that. No, I'm joking.
That's right. The truth comes out.
No, I'm kidding. But like with him filming, that was a thing. He has to have a camera set up, and I understand it. That's how he makes a living. It's like, well, I can do this, or he needs to talk on camera. I can sand something quietly, and that pivoting is just, it's an element of sharing space with other people. And that can be, for people going to maker spaces or something like that, that can be a thing. So yeah, huge on the checklist thing. And I'll share that in the show notes from my PowerPoint, how I kind of do that. So, yeah.
Awesome.
One thing I do, it wasn't necessarily about efficiencies, but it's something I've adopted on every project I make, and it's really, really helpful in a number of ways. And that is if I'm kind of milling a bunch of parts, taking them down to size. Before I start to cut the joinery, I take the time just with a grease pencil to mark super rough general location where every piece of joinery is going to go. Here's a mortise, here's a tenon, here's a dovetail, here's a slot, here's a dado. And one of the main things that did is I try to separate the two thought processes of like, where is this tenon going to go, and laying out the tenon to really precise dimensions. Like those are two separate things, because it's like I don't want to be laying out a tenon worrying about whether it's in the right place. I don't want to be cutting a dado or a rabbet at the table saw worrying if I'm hitting the right edge of the right piece. So I would just have these little grease pencil marks just to show me where the joinery is going to go. And sort of the byproduct of that is by the time you do that and you mark out every little mark where a joint is going to go, you've kind of done a super shorthand build of the entire project. Like, you know, every joint that's going to be cut. And now you can kind of see everything in a much bigger picture. And one of the problems of working stop and start is that your processes can either work for you or work against you. And it's usually like, what do I want to do? Let me go ahead and do this. So you do it. What am I going to do next? I'll do this. Oops, I should have done this before I did that. And that was just a way of life. And I've certainly gotten better at that. But whenever you're trying to make up for things that you've done, the progress starts to slow down. You stop having fun. You start feeling like you're moving backwards instead of moving forwards. Let alone should you cut a dado on the wrong face of a board. Now you're patching things. And the further along you get in a project, like, my gosh, if you actually cut dovetails on the end of a board, starting out, that was a huge thing. And it's like, okay, this has dovetails. I cannot throw this away. I cannot throw away the effort invested. And then you really start stressing out and getting really good or attempting to get good at fixes beyond that point. So just a thing of just marking all the rough locations of where everything is going to go will kind of give you a bird's eye view of everything you have to do, and hopefully help order your processes a little bit so your checklist is in the right order once you do write that thing down.
Good habits.
You know, it's interesting you say that, Mike, because I can remember, and I learned this trick from Garrett Hack when he was teaching at Rosewood. When he's in the milling process, he uses a crayon to mark the grain direction.
Oh,
he just puts a line going from up or down to up, where he's discovered the grain, like not even just reading it, but just like, what is the machine doing or what is the tool doing? And then that way, every time he picks up that component, he knows which way the grain's going. He doesn't have to look at it. He doesn't have to think, oh, it looks like it's going this way, but is it really? And so that was a neat trick too, is that just that coarse mark that turns your brain off. Now you know you've got a good reference.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I've gotten in the habit of, and it'll depend on the layout of your shop, but in the last shop I was in, like, I assess at the joiner which face I'm going to mill. And then that, as I come off the joiner, I'm facing the outfeed of the planer. So I orient that board the way it's going to go through the planer. So by the time I take that on a cart, I'm not having to rethink about what face is being planed and what direction I need to put it in the planer. And then that's oriented on the cart to where when I take it to the table saw, the two originally jointed faces are against the fence and down on the table.
Yeah.
And getting in those habits, it saves a lot of time of having to second guess what you did, including marking. But I try to get in that habit too. I always have boards oriented the same way depending on what machine I'm approaching it with. And that really helps too.
Yeah, those efficiencies are so important. And it's such a subtle thing. I think it takes a while to kind of wrap your head around that. But yeah, just stacking your parts in the correct orientation so you don't have to worry about it for the next task through. And kind of what you were saying, Vic, it's like, mill work, joining and planing, don't you want to get someone to do that for you? It's like, no, that's when you do all the detective work. Like you said, you know where the grain turns around, you know where there's a knot, you know all of your parts and pieces. You're doing 4 legs. Is there a sliver of sapwood, or the grain gets a little squirrely on one face, or there's a little knot? It's like you were kind of planning the entire piece, the project, and where every part is going and what orientation it's going to find within that final piece. Yeah, that milling process, I love that. That's And you're right. One board, you're going in the joint, and you just hear this tick, tick, tick. It's like, okay, I'm going to remember that. And when I pick up the hand plane, I'm going to be careful, or maybe the card scraper is going to take care of that for me. Yeah.
Working with Philip Morley, when I was doing runs of his chairs, like in production mode, it was like that board might have this huge knot in it, but that's a perfect arm, and we're going to cut a cove cut right where that knot is. So you know, and working with somebody else, I also got me in the habit of orienting boards a certain way, assisting classes, because if you're teaching, you want to know you can pick up a board, do a process, and it's where it needs to be, you're not there trying to second guess. So there's this like language, that you learn as you work with other people. Yeah, that is the fun part of milling. It's like, well, that's a perfect board for this, actually, even with that giant tear out right here.
Yeah.
But it's going to be just fine.
Yeah, and sometimes you get that little knot, and it's like I either want to get rid of it or have it in the middle of the piece. I don't want to cut halfway through it.
Right.
And so it's like, am I going to cut it off, or should I just keep it and make sure I don't cut halfway into it? Yeah. And then you get out the template and you put it on there. It's like, oh, I can just
right there.
I can do it. So that's fun.
I feel like knot or no knot.
By the time I'm done milling, it's like, man, this whole thing is horrible. Like, there are so many defects here. But by doing your best, try to get everything, hide what you don't want, get the good faces where you do want them. Then by the time I'm done, everything looks good. It's the times when I don't pay attention to that where it comes back to bite you a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think that whole knot situation, it's like, do I include the knot or do I not include the knot? Like, there's acceptable arguments for both. There is zero acceptable argument for cut it in half.
Right? Yeah.
Because it does
feature the very middle of that knot.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. How do you feel about jumping into another question?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
If we have time for one more.
I know. I had a feeling this was going to be a long answer, but I love it. This is one I added this morning. So this one's from Kevin. He said, Vic recently got spicy, suggesting woodworkers just need more practice. What is something you recommend woodworkers do as a practice? And how do you measure skill proficiency in that? And what the next step to keep improving in the exercise? And what's the next step to keep improving in the exercise?
Right. So, I don't know if I got spicy. I feel like that. You know what I mean? I think I was just calling it the way I saw it. And it's like a lot of people, like when you do any sort of physical task, it doesn't matter what it is. Like there's something about getting the reps in and doing it. Like you know what I mean? You can read all the books in the world, right? And like if we were to pick something like golf, right? No golfer goes out onto the course first thing in the spring without hitting a bucket of balls first. And if they do, they're not serious about getting better. Mm-hmm. But you have to like put your reps in and you have to do stuff and you have to like, so like for me, like, so let's take sawing, for example. A lot of people complain about not being able to saw straight. And so the reality is that the way to learn how to saw straight is to saw stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I recommend people get like a 12-inch piece, like 6-inch wide piece of 3/4 inch poplar, strike a line, and then just don't even have angles, just straight cuts. And then, but don't just cut, and then look at them afterwards and go, oh, wow, that's awful, right? Make a cut, look at the cut. Which way is your saw biasing? Everybody biases one way or the other, mm-hmm. right? Or if you've got a poorly sharpened saw, it will do it for you. Yes. But let's just assume that that's not the case for now. But and then it's like, okay, I'm leaning to the right, so I'm going to try to like coax the saw bit over to the left a little bit the next time, and then you do it again, and then you do it again, and then you have to like look at each one of them and be critical of it. And then before, like, within an hour, you're playing little games with yourself. Well, I'm going to be on the right-hand side of the line. I'm going to be on the left-hand side of the line. I'm going to take the line. Like, you can start to play with it and like challenge yourself, and like it doesn't take long, right? But then you go about your tasks in the shop, and then it's like you're starting a new project and it requires you to cut dovetails. So you're not just gonna lay out your dovetails and start cutting them, right? You're gonna get a scrap piece of wood and you're gonna remind yourself, right? Like, this is how I cut. This is how I meet this line. This is how I do it. I think Gary Rogowski did an article one time about the 5-minute dovetail, where he basically like gets his brain into the frame of mind by just quickly, with no layout, just quickly doing a dovetail to like, yes, I got to hold the saw like this. I got to do this. I got to do that. And then now he's warmed up his brain. He's warmed up his body. And now he's going for it. And so, but what you can't do is moan about not being good and then not practice. You can't do that, because then you're just going to...
One or the other.
Yeah. You either practice, and then if you legitimately practice and you still can't get it, and I mean, this is very rare. Mike, you've taught hundreds of students. Like, it's very rare that somebody is just completely inept.
Golf.
Right?
Go golf.
Right. Same. And so I don't golf because I suck at it and I have no desire to get better at it. And so...
It's extremely rare that I've ever worked with anyone who wasn't capable of improving.
100%. Yeah. So, I mean, the goal when you're practicing is to like develop the sort of unconscious competency.
Yeah.
Right? To stop thinking about the actual process and just your body just naturally does the process. I used to think that about Garrett Hack. The first time I saw Garrett Hack operate a block plane, I was like, that's incredible. That guy, that tool is just an extension of his hand. How is he doing that? And then, there's this time where like you're woodworking and then all of a sudden you recognize, I haven't been thinking about how to use this. I've just been doing it.
Yeah.
And then you realize, oh my goodness, I might have gotten it. And so I think that's the key. There's no next step. It's like, if you can reliably, in the saw example, if you can reliably cut on the line, off the line, leave the line, take the line, left side, right side,
right,
then you're good. And then keep practicing, keep doing it, because the second you don't, then you lose it.
Right. And then you got to make sure your layout lines are in the right place once you actually make a piece of furniture. Because if you nail a line and the line's not where it needs to be, that's a whole different skill set. So, Amanda, what do you think in terms of practice? You mentioned possibly getting some time to actually do some practice work. My guess is you're either woodworking, you're not woodworking. I don't see you as like, I'm going to go spend a day practicing saw cuts.
Yeah. I mean, I really want to get good at dovetails this year. This is a goal. It's been for a while and I've avoided it. I mean, and it's one of those things that I, like if somebody were to ask me to do it on a piece, I wouldn't feel very comfortable doing it. And so I've kind of made a list of things that I would like to have as in my back pocket when it gets brought up for a commission in the future, where I'm not, having to account for time learning how to do that thing while I'm in the middle of a project. And I think, I used to think that there were a lot of naturally good woodworkers. And I think now I've learned that it's practice. Like, it would be almost insulting to look at Philip the way I used to look at Philip and think, oh, he's just like picked this up and really it's hours and hours and hours of dedication. And it's important, I'm not a naturally good woodworker and I never will be. It's all repetition. So yeah, practice, super important. And the little checklist, like having a side thing is like, I can, go spend a couple hours in the shop doing something, or even looking online. Like I've learned being on a website so much, I've learned a lot just from watching videos and reading articles. And like, that's in the back of my mind is like, oh, I'll add that to the short list of things, not short, but list of small things I can do and improve on. Right.
Yeah, you sell yourself short. You're a fantastic woodworker. I get improving certain skill sets, but I think the most important skill in woodworking is your thought process, how you can think through a project, that kind of creative problem solving aspect. You've got that nailed. And I think that that's where a lot of people really struggle. It's not so much just the skill set, it's thinking something all the way through, this notion that you can read enough articles or watch enough YouTube videos to be prepared to face every challenge you're going to face in the shop. You can't. And I don't think that's the point. I like that for me, getting into the shop and figuring out how to do something, how to set up a machine, or come up with a series of steps to make a process easier. I love that part of it. And I think, so for me, I don't know if you would call that practice, but first disclaimer, I do not have the patience to practice anything. The last thing I want to do is make a dovetail corner and throw it in the wood pile and burn it in my wood stove. It's like, no, I'm not going to let that go to waste. I do like the idea of, if you're going to practice dovetails, get 4 boards. That gives you 4 chances to practice. By the time you're done, they're going to be ugly and gappy, but guess what? They're not going to fall apart, and you've got a nail tray or whatever, a shelf to hang up on your wall. So I think it's more that level of thing. And if you're, instead of just doing a, one sample dovetail, if you're doing 4 pieces, dovetail each corner, then you're getting into cutting parts to length accurately, to layout. And I think it leads to that next level of working on the skill set of actually building. And while I don't want to waste a dovetail or a saw cut, at the same time, if you jump right into this project, which is super ambitious, that's super tough too. So I would say that a lot of maybe what I would consider practice are no risk pieces where I just want to go out and make something. It's not an article. It's not a commission. I'm just going to go out. I've got an idea. I'm going to bang it out. And then you end up with something. For me, I end up with something less than perfect, but often has a real spark to it, which is like, oh, it still has the gesture to it. It's still got a little flair to it. And if I were to make this again, I know what I would make different. The legs are a little bit fat in this one. Those tenons are a little bit small, but it points the way forward to a nice piece. And I think go out and make unimportant stuff that, go make a toilet paper holder for the bathroom, or, a cabinet to hold the, laundry soap down in the basement next to your, washing machine or something like that. I think that kind of stuff, that level of practice moves your work that much more forward as well.
I also, that really strikes with me, because I remember also the pressure of making and designing and making a first piece after working with Phil for a while. I was just, I dwelled on it over and over again. It ended up being the easel, I think, was like the first thing I really made, but getting to that point, designing for months and months, and and not months, but weeks of going back and forth and just beating myself up over this. And Phil's like, who do you think you are? You think your first piece is just going to be perfect and gorgeous and a flawless thing? And I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. That's as important as any amount of repetition, is designing and making something to completion. Like you said, informs other pieces. It's like, no, you're not going to design the most beautiful piece you've ever built the first time you do it. You just have to do it, get it out.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Shop furniture is a fantastic, shop furniture or /decor/storage bins. That's the best thing in the world to practice on, because if you want to learn how to make a box, like a dovetailed box, you don't start with Uncle Morty's urn. right? Like,
Well, he's not going to see it.
no, he
so
won't
maybe.
complain, right? But the reality is that like make like a little box to put your favorite plane in, or like make a little tray that you can put. Like I always teach people, and again, I know not everybody's looking, but like this is just a little single
Yeah,
dovetail
perfect.
box,
Perfect.
and
Yep.
it holds quarter sheets of paper, and it's if it turns out great, awesome.
Yeah.
If it turns out like garbage, who cares? You can always put wood filler in it and paint it. Like, but you've gone through the process. And Mike, you're absolutely right. Like an individual joint teaches you next to nothing, right? Having to make sure that all 4 joints come together. They're the right size. The pieces are the right size. The box is square. All that other kind of stuff. You can practice multiple things at once, right? Including you can do layout. Because really, those are all the things that you're going to come up against, right? You got to practice milling. You got to practice layout. You got to practice cutting the joinery. Like all of that has to come together. You never do one portion of that without the rest of it.
Right.
Yeah, that's a very good
Right.
point. Amazing.
Cool.
All right. That was 2 questions, but we did pretty
I
good.
love talking.
I love
with
this
you
one.
guys.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this always
that's
end
what
up
it's
being
about.
really fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really enjoy these. But yeah, thank you guys so much. And we'll have to do this again soon.
100%.
Right on.
Okay, that does it for this episode of Shop Talk Live. Thank you to Vic, Amanda, and Mike. If you're watching on YouTube, please click that thumbs up button. If you're listening on Apple Music or Spotify or whatever, a 5-star review does us so much good. Also, if you aren't subscribed to the new YouTube channel, please head on over and subscribe to the Shop Talk Live YouTube channel, even if you don't listen there or you don't watch there, whatever. It helps us juice the algorithm. All right, that does it. We'll see you in 2 weeks with another episode. Thanks for listening.